Okay, welcome to the Select Board meeting, February 28th, 2022. We'll have I guess we'll call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the consent agenda.
So move to approve the consent agenda, which includes the town accountant warrants of January 27th, February 3rd, February 15th, February 17th, and February 24th. The minutes of the December 6th, 2021 executive session, not to be released at this time, and the January 20th, 2022 regular session, the Holocaust Remembrance Proclamation, which I'll read in a second, and the gift acceptance of $1,500 from Alcott Parent Teacher Group to the Concord Recreation Scholarship Fund.
Second, but now we can have discussion, right?
Yes.
Okay,
I didn't get any of the town account warrants.
And I didn't either, so I would have to abstain on that.
okay, let's put that
Why
off.
don't we exclude that?
We'll exclude that. Okay, and I understand, Susan, you're going to be our representative at the Holocaust Remembrance. Thank you.
I am, and I'm happy to do that. I just wanted to point out there's a couple of edits in that. And it was Chris, he's not here, that was in touch with the person that is hosting it. And it says in the last paragraph, now therefore, that it's going to be held virtually, but it is going to be held here at the townhouse. So that just needs to be
Great.
edited, and I can do that and send it back, or,
Right, if you want to send that back to Chris.
Okay.
That's great. I guess we'll read it into the record. Go ahead. Jen.
Sure. Days of remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945, 6 million were murdered. Roma, people with disabilities, and Poles were also targeted for destruction or dissemination for racial, ethnic, or national reasons. And millions more, including homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Soviet prisoners of war, and political dissidents, also suffered grievous oppression and death under Nazi tyranny. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and whereas we, the people of Concord, should always remember the terrible events of the Holocaust and the genocides in Armenia, Cambodia, Bosnia, Rwanda, and Darfur, and we all have a duty to use these memories as a catalyst to rid us of racial hatred, intolerance, tyranny, and discrimination. And whereas we, the people of the town of Concord, should actively rededicate ourselves to the principles of individual freedom and a just society. And whereas April 28th, 2022 has been designated pursuant to an act of Congress and internationally as a day of remembrance for victims of the Nazi Holocaust, known as Yom HaShoah, and whereas it is appropriate for the people of Concord to join in the international commemoration. And now, therefore, we, the Concord Select Board, recognize the Holocaust Remembrance event sponsored by the Concord Carlisle Human Rights Council to be held in the Concord Townhouse on Sunday, April 24th, 2022 at 7 p.m. and proclaim the week of April 24th, 2022 through May 1st, 2022 as Days of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust. Proclaim this 28th day of February 2022.
Okay, thank you. And I think we already had a second. Did we vote for the consent?
Not yet.
Okay.
With the exclusion of the accountant's warrants.
Correct. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll put those warrants on the next meeting. Next, we have a 6:30 public hearing, change of manager, Colonial Inn. Is anyone here from the Colonial Inn?
Yes, we are here. I'm Anthony Scott from the Colonial Inn.
Okay, let me move to open the public hearing on the change of manager application by the Concord's Colonial Inn 1 Corporation doing business as the Colonial Inn.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I just put for the record that I am recusing myself on this because I obtained the beverage licenses for the Colonial Inn, but it changed hands several years ago.
Okay,
And I will do the same with regard to the next item.
okay,
Do you
and
need
don't
to be
forget,
absent?
everyone
Do you
should,
need to be absent then?
everyone should speak right into the microphone.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we have the people from the Colonial Inn here by Zoom. If you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, so my first time being added to as my name on a liquor license. I've worked for our ownership for 16 years. I worked for our sister hotel at the Public House in Sturbridge for the last 16 years as the director of events there. And I've been here for just almost a year now. And I'm excited to take on, the property here and to do a lot of great things, and to provide great service to, people from, from the town of Concord and from, from all over as well. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to have my name, supporting that.
Okay, thank you. And are you TIP certified?
I am TIP certified. Yes, I have been for the last probably 13 years.
Excellent. Are there questions from the board? Linda?
Thank you for being here today. I have a question regarding the hours that was on the application. It said 50 hours, and I was just wondering how realistic that was.
I'm here, I would say at least 47 to 60 hours every week. I'm full-time. I'm very, very dedicated to my property. I do live in Sturbridge, but I do come here and I spend 12 hours, on my shifts here regularly. So I would say I'm right around the 50 hours, if not more, weekly.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board?
Well, I guess that we recently had that report, an incident of an alcohol incident at the Colonial Inn, and I just thought I would take this moment to check in on actions, that have been taken since that time, since the last time that we discussed the incident.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've gone ahead and we've updated all of our employees in food and beverage tip certification. We do talk about proper practices for alcohol service regularly at daily meetings. We've put a lot of plans in place. We've renewed our beverage policy to try to raise awareness to the staff that are in and around serving alcohol. But the most important one for me, I think, is getting that tip certifications done. That website and that program creates a lot of awareness, and I know that I've taken it multiple times, and it may seem like, oh, I've already learned all this, but every time I come out of it learning something new. So just talking about it regularly every day and getting all of our staff up to date on that certification, I think is a great step in the right direction for that.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the public? Questions from anyone on Zoom? Okay, I think we'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, we'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the application by the Colonial Inn to change its manager.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and perfect timing, we have a 6:40 public hearing, change of manager for the Concord Rod and Gun Club.
I just, again, note for the record,
Yes,
Madam Chair, that since I have been an officer and director of the Rod and Gun Club, I will also excuse myself from participating in this hearing.
okay, thank you, Henry.
Okay, move to open the public hearing on the change of manager application by the Concord Rod and Gun Club.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's a right-handed microphone.
Okay, sir.
My name is Michael Albanese. I just took over as the house manager and the bar manager of the Concord Rod and Gun. I'm now officially a life member. I've been there for 15, 20 years almost. So, you know, we just pretty much, it's a beer and wine license. And my duties is, you know, managing the bar, maintaining the building and the premise, and keeping an eye on everything. I'm tips certified, and all our bartenders are, they're all up to date on their tips and everything else required.
Okay. Questions from the board? I had one question. I noticed that you wrote down, I think, 40 hours that you would be there, but I also noticed, I think, that you're employed elsewhere?
Yes, I'm a licensed general contractor, but I'm at the point right now, I'm almost at my retirement age, but I spend a lot of time at the club. I'm in and out of there daily, you know, checking on what's happening with the premise, the building, the grounds, and whatnot. So I'm in and out of there. 40 hours, you know, some weeks are more, some weeks are less. Nightly, we have occasions, we have functions going on that, you know, people are present, and so I make myself present. Matter of fact, we're having a meeting tonight. After I leave here, I'm heading to the club. So I do spend a lot of time at the club.
So there's somebody else, an assistant manager, who can cover for you when you're not there?
Usually we do is, if any of the other bartenders are there, they have the ability to open the bar at that point in time. We only do it with the tips managers. Everything's keyed and locked, so it's not like it's open. You just come and serve yourself. Everything's locked down.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Susan?
It may have been in the application, but I missed it. Are you open 7 days a week?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Matt?
No.
Okay. Any questions from the audience or from anyone watching at home on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we'll have a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and motion, change in manager?
Sure. Move to approve the application of the change of manager by the Concord Rod and Gun Club.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Good luck. You too. Next, we will have the town manager's report.
Thank you and good evening. I will be brief this evening. I know you have a lot left on your agenda. Obviously, the big news for the next couple of weeks are the public hearings. The public hearing tonight, there's one on Thursday, the Finance Committee, and then 2 next week. The police department took possession of its first Tesla cruiser today. That was pretty exciting for the chief and for the staff over there. You may remember that was funded almost entirely by a donation from a member of the community. So we look forward to testing that out and hoping that it fits nicely into the fleet of vehicles. Last week, Chief O'Connor, Chief Judge, and I attended a meeting over at MCI Concord. We met the new superintendent, Joanne Lines. She took over in November of last year, but she has spent her entire career working at the Department of Corrections, and most of that time at MCI Concord. So this is a meeting that we have twice a year. It's a community forum, an opportunity for us to raise issues with the facility and to become more knowledgeable about their operations. The census at MCI Concord is at an all-time low. It's below 500 at this point, so that is a significant decrease. The fire department participated in some training last week with neighboring communities of Lincoln, Sudbury, and Wayland. The topic of the training was a unified system for responding to hostile events. That training took place over at the high school, and we appreciate that the school administration's willingness to let us use their facility for training. As you know, the mask mandate was lifted, but there are still reasons that community members may want to wear masks, and we ask that people be respectful of individual choices, and then remind residents that masks are still required in some places, including public transportation, in certain buildings that are posted requiring masks. The Ceremony and Celebrations Committee met last Friday, and I know that this board is aware, and we'd like to make the community aware that there will be a Patriots' Day parade. And as of the meeting last Friday, there were about 20 groups that have signed on to join the parade. So more information to come, and we are coordinating with Minuteman National Park as well. We conducted first-round interviews for the health director position, and second-round interviews are expected to be scheduled later this week. There are lots of events happening both at the library and the Council on Aging. There's more information about the specific events in the report and on the website. And just a reminder that today was the first day that we opened to our expanded public service hours, which are generally reflective of the hours that we were open prior to the pandemic. So at the Townhouse, the Kais Road campus, and the CMLP, we are essentially open to the hours that we were open before. There's more information on the website. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very happy to see that return to normal hours. That's wonderful. I had one question about the written report about the water. It mentions a clean water state revolving fund. And I'm not sure if I'm even talking about the right report. It could have been the week before.
It was
Okay.
last week.
Okay, I was just wondering, what is a state revolving fund for clean water?
So the state has a funding mechanism for local projects where it provides either no cost or subsidized loans to municipalities for water and sewer extensions. This board we've had some items before you with the septic betterment loan program. That's through the state revolving fund, and the NAGOG treatment plant. We are expecting to fund most of that using that particular funding source with a low-cost interest or low-interest loan for the project.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for the interim town manager? No questions? Okay. All right, thank you very much. We will move on then. We have nominations and then appointments. Oh, wait a minute, we get chair's remarks, which I think unless any of you object, we are going to, as a select board, start meeting live every week now. If anyone has a problem with that, speak up now or contact me. I think it's with the mask mandate being removed and the COVID cases coming down, I think we have to be prepared that we might have to go back to Zoom at some point, but for now, I think we're going to go live. Linda?
I'm aware of at least one date that I'll have to do by Zoom.
Sure, and that's still allowed until July, so no problem with that.
It also is possible to miss a meeting. I think we haven't been used to it recently, just because Zoom always gives us the option, but I think it's okay to be excused on an occasion.
Yeah,
Well, I haven't missed a meeting yet, so.
No, I don't want to hurt your perfect record.
yeah, this is
Okay.
a very dedicated board. I missed one in November, so, yeah, very dedicated board, thank you. Okay, and my other announcement is that nominations are being taken now for the Honored Citizen of the Year. And they are due this Friday, March 4th.
Wow.
Yeah, really quick timetable. So get your nominations in this week. Okay, now we're ready for committee nominations and appointments.
So I have a technical question about the very first, which is the reappointment to the ZBA of 2 members. Do we just do the reappointment straight away without the nomination?
You know, I thought about that. I'm not sure. So that's why we put it on the nominations now. I don't think we can do the appointment now because we didn't give the notice.
Okay, so we will state that there are two members of the Zoning Board of Appeals seeking reappointment. Theo Kindermans of 252 Fairhaven Road with term expiring April 30th, 2025, and Ravi Faye of 169 Plainfield Road for an associate term expiring April 30th, 2025.
Right, and we will appoint them unless there's any issue next week.
Okay.
Committee
So then,
appointments, right.
move to appoint Eric Macy of 225 Prairie Street to the trustees of town donations for a term to expire June 30th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, okay. We also have some license renewals for tour guides. I believe, Linda, you had that question. Yes, we did approve a long list in December, but these have come in since. So does anyone have any questions about these? They've all paid their fee and met all the requirements.
Do we have the list of names that do we need to read them into the record? I don't have them on the motions document.
No, but it's in the agenda packet.
It is, it's the third to the last page in the agenda packet.
And I don't believe we read them the last time.
Okay, well, so then,
Well, we
let's
could
just
say
say,
as shown in the packet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Move to approve the town guide license renewals for calendar year 2022 with the names as indicated in our packet for this evening's meeting.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we have a few minutes left before our public hearing. We're going to have a very brief update on the 250th celebration from our liaison member, Henry Day.
I've been working with John Arena in contacting people and reviewing candidates. We have a list of 70 people that have we put on a list. John has been in contact with 50 of those 70, and 26 have indicated a desire or have already submitted volunteer cards. I know that there's several quite capable people who are in that list.
Henry, can you go right up to the microphone? Yep, thank you. There, thanks a lot.
Should I say it all again?
No, keep going. Okay, 26 applicants. And how many slots do we have again? 9 or 10 or something?
I'm not clear as to, the board approved a charge back in February. When I came on the board, I asked for some changes, and I think some changes were made to the original charge. So we may have to clarify that. I think the original number was something like 12.
Right.
And that is probably the number that may stand, although we may have agreed to reduce that number. But we have to go back through the minutes to find out where this stands. It would really be helpful if we had a definitive catalog of committee charges that was kept up to date. So we would actually know what the different committees were supposed to do and how they're supposed to be formed.
Right, okay. I think what we need is an agenda item maybe next week to talk some more about the 250th because, well, I'd like to hear from the other board members. Do you want to discuss the process by which we have 26 applicants. We have something like 12 slots. How are we going to decide who's going to be on this committee, because we need to get moving with this committee.
Well, I mean, the executive committee is just one body,
Right.
and I anticipate that we will have subcommittees, so it's actually wonderful to have 26 candidates, and I think we may have full use for all of them.
Absolutely.
We'll need more than that.
Yeah, eventually, yes.
We would need more than that. But the
what-
usual,
What I want to know is, do we want Henry to go off and make this decision, or does the board want to take a look at all of these applications? How do you want to proceed to decide who's on the executive committee?
well, the board will have the ultimate decision because
Right.
there will be nominations and appointments.
Right.
And the usual process is that the liaison to the committee is the one that reviews and presents the candidates for nomination.
Right. Susan, I saw your hand up.
Well, no, my question wasn't about that. It was just about how long that process will take so
Right.
we can get kicked off.
Right, right.
We're hoping to have this done within 30 days.
So it sounds like first we need clarity about any changes that were made to the original charge. And then it could be that as the volunteer cards come in, perhaps you could make recommendations as to who would be on the executive committee and then begin to suggest the subcommittees that the others would be on.
Well,
And maybe if that could come back to us
Yeah.
for one.
I think that what we decided the last time we discussed the charge, we decided that if changes were needed, we would have the committee meet and the committee itself would make the recommendations for what they thought needed to be changed in the
Right.
charge itself.
Well, if I may, Henry, I think this is going to work pretty well then. If you were saying 30 days, we have a meeting on March 28th, and we can put this on for, however long we need, 20, 30 minutes, whatever, and we can actually go through what you're recommending for, which people on the executive committee, which people on the subcommittees, out of the people that have applied so far. And in the meantime, between now and then, I can get you, with the town manager's office, we can get you the updated charge.
The March 28th,
Right, that's 30 days from now, so I'm sure we can get you the updated charge this week. I don't think we made a lot of changes to it.
okay.
Any other discussion about the 250th?
Well, at a previous meeting, we had appointed Mike Lawson as the Select Board representative to the Commonwealth's Commission on the 250th, and they've been a long time putting this all together, but I understand that the first meeting will be on March 15th. So he will be there representing us.
Okay, excellent. I will also invite him if he wants to attend on March 28th. So for miscellaneous correspondence, we do have one letter regarding the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And is there any public comment about this select board meeting that we've just had before we adjourn to the public hearing for the town meeting? Does anyone have public comment? All right, seeing none, I think we can move to adjourn to the public hearing for the annual town meeting.
Move to adjourn to the public hearing for annual town meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned, and we're... So let's start over. Welcome to the public hearing. This is the first of 5 public hearings. All of the dates are shown on the cover of the warrant that was mailed to every house. So tonight we are going to cover Articles 4, 5, 6, 16, 23, 36, 37, and 38. And the way we'll do this is The presenter for each article will go up to the podium, present, and then we'll take questions from the people in the room here, and then we'll take questions from the people on Zoom. And then we'll go to the next article. Okay. I'm being told we need to take a motion to open this public hearing, so we might as well do that.
Move to open the public hearing for the Select Board articles for Annual Town Meeting 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Keeping us honest here. All right, Article 4, ratified Personnel Board classification actions. And I believe Nancy Comfrey is speaking on that.
Yes, yes. Good evening.
Nancy Crowley.
I'm on Zoom.
Nancy Crowley, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Crowley. I live at 5 Concord Green. I'm a member of the Personnel Board. So, slide number 1. This article requests town meeting approval of classification actions taken by the Personnel Board during the past year. This is routine business that applies to the town's regular status, non-union position. Second slide.
Who's running that?
Ms. Crowley, we're trying to work to hear you better. The audio is not coming through very clearly.
All right. So I'll talk louder.
Well, that's worse.
I don't know if that's improving
I
things.
think that's worse.
Yeah.
All right. Is it my computer? Is that the problem?
That's better.
That's better.
It's better, yeah, now. I think we can proceed.
I think it's, all right. Did everyone hear the first slide?
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Second slide. A classification action is an amendment to the town's classification and compensation plan that adds or deletes a job title, assigns a job title to a salary range, or reassigns a title from one salary range to another within the plan. Existence of a title on the plan does not determine whether the position will be funded. Funding for positions is subject to the limitations of the approved general fund and enterprise fund budget. Slide 3. All right. Classification actions become necessary throughout the year when the town manager creates a new position, when the duties of an existing position change in a significant manner, or when it is determined that a position title needs to be updated. Given current labor market conditions, it is particularly important that the town continually act on opportunities to redesign positions in order to engage staff and attract talent to meet the evolving operational needs. In accordance with the personnel bylaw, the personnel board assigns titles and salary ranges as needed throughout the year and puts them into immediate effect. Salary grade assignments are determined by using the town's standardized classification system, which groups positions by assigning weighted points to common occupational features and distinguishing characteristics such as the nature of the work, the level of the work, job requirements, job qualifications, and working conditions. In the event the personnel board determines that a new or changed position requires an amendment to the classification and compensation plan, the board temporarily authorizes the change pending ratification at the next town meeting. Currently, 7 actions taken by the Personnel Board are subject to ratification. 4 actions were taken before the warrant deadline and therefore are included in the text of the article. The article also addresses any additional actions taken before the conclusion of town meeting. To date, 3 more actions reflecting new titles have been taken due to the reorganization of the IT department. All actions taken between the warrant deadline and the conclusion of town meeting will be filed with the town clerk's office. These actions, as intended by the personnel bylaw, maintain appropriate job titles and salary ranges in order to attract and retain competent employees, comply with pay equity laws, and prolong the life of the classification and compensation plan, thereby reducing the need for comprehensive studies that are both very costly and labor-intensive. Accordingly, they are presented to town meeting for ratification. That is that presentation on Article 4.
Thank you. Are there questions from the people in the room here? Okay. Are there questions from the board? Actually, I should have started with.
I was just curious about one thing, which was the title production manager. I realized that that's an existing position that's just being reclassified, but I didn't understand what role, what department or role the production manager would have in Concord. The video production manager. I am just seeing that. Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
Okay.
All right.
right.
Sorry.
So I think that's answered.
Yes.
We have that production manager here with us tonight. Other questions from the board? Questions from people on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we will move on to Article 5.
Could we ask how many people are on Zoom at this point?
And that is the classification and compensation plans for regular status positions.
Yes.
Article 5 proposes that town meeting amend in accordance with the personnel bylaw, the classification and compensation plan for non-union regular status town positions effective July 1st, 2022. The recommended schedules are printed in the warrant. This action impacts approximately 60% of the town's regular workforce and less than 15% of the total workforce when school and non-regular employees are considered.
Excuse me, Nancy. This is Amy. I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you all know the slides aren't up yet for Article 5, so you might want to
Oh, I'm
pause.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just looking.
All right.
Right, I think they're looking for the slides. Maybe hold on.
Okay.
And while we're waiting, how many people do we have on Zoom? Our production manager, do you know?
He's working on something else.
Okay,
I see 35 participants.
thank you.
There's only one of him.
Thanks for your patience. We have a new person learning how to be a Zoom meister tonight. Harry? Find it. No, Kate's with her. Kate can't find it.
Amy Foley, do you have access to the presentation for Article 5?
I do. Yeah. Give me just a moment. I can pull it up.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I think we are ready to proceed now. Nancy?
Okay, thank you. Article 5 proposes that town meeting amend, in accordance with the personnel bylaw, the classification and compensation plan for non-union, regular status town positions effective July 1st, 2022. The recommended schedules are printed in the warrant. This action impacts approximately 60% of the town's regular workforce and less than 15% of the total workforce when the school and non-regular employees are considered.
I'm sorry, can you hold on again?
Okay.
Okay. Well, I know they were on the right. Okay,
That's all right.
now you're on the right slide.
It is important to note that Article 5 does not control how much money will be allocated to employees' salaries and salary increases in fiscal year 2023. Actual salary increases are set by the town manager and personnel board after town meeting within the limits of the approved general fund and enterprise fund budget. Article 5 approves job titles, groupings of positions into grades, and salary ranges. Adoption of the classification and compensation plan printed in the warrant would: number 1, incorporate the classification actions set forth in Article 4, split the electrical labor grades 2 and 3 into 2 grades each, increase all salary range margins by 3%, and further increase the EL2B, EL3B, EM2, EM4, EM5, and EM6 range margins such that they are 9% higher than fiscal year 22, and they would further increase any range minimum below the $14.25 an hour to the new Massachusetts minimum wage and adjust the midpoints accordingly. The EL2, et cetera, and EM, those are light plans. The market has changed a lot, and so we are trying to change to keep up with things. The town manager and human resource director recommend these amendments to the plan based on current and anticipated workforce needs, continuing review of the compensation provided by similar municipalities, light plants, fitness facilities, and other employers with comparable positions to Concord's, and continuing review of equal pay for comparable positions. Excuse me. As previously mentioned, town meeting action on Article 5 affects salary ranges, but does not control the amount of the actual salary increases to be received by employees in fiscal year 2023. Accordingly, there is not a direct cost associated with adoption of this plan. Actual salary increases are set by the town manager and the personnel board after the town meeting within the limits of the approved budget for the fiscal year. Therefore, if Article 5 is approved by town meeting, but funding for salary increases is not available in the approved budget, the salary range limits will increase while each employee's actual pay will not. Likewise, if Article 5 is not approved by town meeting, the employees may still receive salary increases within the existing range limit, provided that the funds for those increases are available within the approved budget. In conclusion, with the understanding that maintaining fair and competitive salary ranges for the town's non-union positions is a very important factor in attracting and retaining competent employees, the personnel board will make recommendations at town meeting for updates to this classification and compensation plan.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions from the board? Questions? Oh, Linda?
Thank you, Nancy, for that presentation. We were having a little bit of difficulty hearing certain sections, and if we could go back to slide number 3.
Sure.
We may not be able to go back to slide number 3. My question, as I recall, had to do with the first bullet, and if you could just summarize what you were trying to tell us on that first bullet, that would be helpful.
You mean on slide 3?
On slide 3, yeah.
Yeah, I can just sort of review it if you want. It was the adoption of the classification and compensation plan that's printed in the warrant. That would incorporate the classification actions set forth in Article 4. They would also split the electrical grades 2 and 3 into 2 grades each and increase all salary range margins by 3%. Further increase the EL 2 and 3, as well as the EM 2, 4, 5, and 6 range margins, such that they would be 9% higher than fiscal year 22, and they would further increase any range minimum below the $14.25 an hour to the new mass minimum wage and adjust midpoints accordingly. I also had said the light plant is the one with the EL, etc. And the market has changed dramatically, and so we are trying to change with the percents to keep up with it.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
No, but I'll get at it another way. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Okay, other questions from the audience? Any questions from people on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we will proceed to Article 6.
All right. Now,
Article 6, yes.
yes, is there a,
They're pulling up the slide deck now. Hopefully, the Finance Committee will be a lot more organized than we are. Oh, boy. Here it comes.
okay.
That's Article
Wait a
30.
minute, that's Article 36.
That's not the correct one. I apologize. The person who usually handles this is not here tonight, so we do not have our usual staff running this.
Terry, this is Erin Stevens. If you need, I can pull up the articles as well remotely.
That would be very helpful, Erin. Yeah, maybe that would be the best. Okay, here we go. Article 6.
Okay. First of all, Article 6 proposes amendments to 3 sections of the personnel bylaw. The sections regarding paid holidays, vacation, and bereavement leave. The provisions only apply to regular status, non-union town positions.
You need the next slide?
Yes.
Next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay. As background, it may be helpful to review some details about the personal bylaw. The bylaw was established as allowed under Massachusetts law. Its stated purpose is to establish an equitable and efficient system of personal administration for town employees. It does not apply to elected officers, employees with personal contracts, employees covered by a collective bargaining agreement, or employees of the school department. It sets forth provisions related to compensation and paid leave benefits, and it determines approval authority for such provisions. The first bylaw section addressed in Article 6 is paid holiday leave. It is important to note that Massachusetts law identifies legal holidays on which town offices must be closed, but such law does not provide employees with pay on those days. Town employees holding non-union positions only receive pay for holidays that town meeting incorporates into the bylaw. Juneteenth, Independence Day, is now a legal holiday on which town offices must close. Approval of Article 6 would, number one, provide paid leave to regular status employees for Juneteenth, add reference to the indigenous People's Day with Columbus Day, and replace gendered language with neutral terms in this section. The next bylaw section addressed by Article 6 is paid vacation leave. And currently the bylaw states that no vacation time may be taken until an employee has completed 6 months of service unless authorized in advance by the town manager. Management has identified this as an unnecessary restriction that is counter to providing a flexible work environment attractive to today's workforce. The Personnel Board has not identified value in maintaining the restriction. So approval of Article 6 would remove the restriction and replace gendered language with neutral terms in this section. Bereavement leave. The last section addressed in Article 6 is bereavement leave. Currently, the bylaw provides up to 3 days of paid leave when needed due to the death of an immediate family member. Approval of Article 6 would increase the limit from 3 to 5 days. It would remove the word immediate when referring to family and add a reference to household members. These changes to the bylaw would allow policy updates that provide 5 days of leave for certain relationships, such as a spouse or child. And further, bereavement leave could also be expanded to include some leave for relationships not currently covered, such as a child-in-law or a sibling-in-law. The Personnel Board believes that this is a very reasonable approach to bereavement leave that is consistent with other employers and recognizes the needs of employees. The Personnel Board believes a different approach to the personnel bylaw would increase efficiency and responsiveness to workforce trends. However, we are mindful that the Personnel Study Task Force appointed by the Select Board will recommend the future makeup of the personnel bylaw and the role of the Personnel Board and town meeting in compensation and leave for non-union positions. Therefore, we have limited proposals to only a few sections of the bylaw at this time. We do recommend approval of the proposed paid leave provisions to support maintenance of fair and competitive benefits for the town's non-union position.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? Questions from the people here in the room? Mary Hartman, if you'd come up to the microphone, please. State your name and address.
Sure. My name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green.
I'm not sure that's working.
Thank you. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. I have 2 questions. Do we have an estimate of the cost of these changes? Is my first question. And my second question is, do these changes put us on par with our peer communities? Are we ahead of them or behind them, or are we just catching up? So I'd like a feel for both of those. Thank you.
Amy, would you like to answer those? You have a little more information than I do.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So on these changes related to leave, the employees that would receive these benefits already receive full pay. We budget for that. So there's not a direct cost to any of this. If, for example, for Juneteenth, we have to close anyway. So those employees either would have to take an unpaid leave or use time that they, are already going to be paid, like a vacation day or personal leave. So since that's already in the budget, there's not a direct new cost that isn't covered. There's some minor things like when there's somebody is out, that if there were, let's say, a facilities emergency or something like that, that it might turn into some other type of pay for callback, but not the direct cost for the regular status employees. And then in terms of other towns, I certainly have seen quite a number of other towns that do have 5 days of bereavement leave for some of the immediate relationships. And so, and I've seen some that don't. So this would kind of put us in par. We're not way off with others, but it is something that's more consistent with some of them. Juneteenth, I believe others are adopting. So I think it's consistent with what others are doing as a whole.
And I believe her other question was about any costs. You may have addressed that. Okay, you addressed that. All right. Other questions?
Did that really answer the question? As I assume the question that you wanted the answer to would have been taking the gross cost of the current employees at the current scale and then applying the new scale to the same employees and seeing what the difference in cost would be.
I think that's about a different article, so maybe I misunderstood. I thought the question was about Article 6, which is the bereavement, vacation, and Juneteenth. So maybe I've misunderstood where the question applies.
You addressed my question, which was, and you said basically there's no incremental cost, which is different than we might be losing some productivity. But you did address that question.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
Good evening, Nancy Bucas, 1360 Monument Street. This is a little different kind of question. It had been my understanding that the Personnel Board would, during this year, look at their role and how it might be different. And I wondered if they'd had a chance to do that. And, for instance, had they discussed whether the Personnel Board might be open to hearing employees' grievances and that kind of thing, be a much more personal, interactive board with the employees. And has that been discussed?
I believe you're referring to the Personnel Study Task Force.
No bylaw, yeah.
Yeah, Personal Bylaw Study Task Force. And that is a different group than the Personnel Board. And yes, they are studying grievances, the bylaw itself. Susan is the liaison and may wish to. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes, that's yes, right.
Yeah, the task force that's their charge, is to look at the bylaw and the associated documents that dictate what the Personnel Board does and recommend changes.
Excellent. I'm very happy to hear that. I was on the Personnel Board for 5 years, and I think that's very necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think they're due to report by a year from now. Is that correct? Or next June?
Yeah, I think they're hoping to be able to report substantially sooner than that, but their deadline is town meeting of '23.
Great. Okay. Any other questions or questions on Zoom? All right, seeing none.
Anita technically has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. We can't see here who's got their hands up on Zoom. So I guess the best thing to do, if you're on Zoom and you have a question, just start speaking. So Anita, your name and address.
Anita Techley, 260 Virginia Road. Nancy, I'm wondering if the Personnel Board has considered the concept of flexible leave for employees, which would be is very popular in the private sector, just starting to take hold in the public sector, where there would be a combination, employees could use a given number of days for sick leave, personal leave, bereavement leave, for any of those uses, with some possibility of a portion being able to be carried over from year to year. But it's considered more equitable for among married versus single employees, because some of the leave policies, particularly bereavement leave, would affect single people differently from married people. And I'm wondering if that, as opposed to nickel and diming some of these things with bereavement, 3 days here, 5 days there for any number of things, why not just give a bank of days to employees that they could use for what they want?
I think I'll refer that to Amy, because I think that that's something she has a better handle on than I do, Anita.
Sure, it's certainly something that we've looked at from time to time and would love to be able to see happen at some point. There are some complications in getting there for us. It's working through how to do that through a bylaw, how to do some transfers related to the sick time that people have now and what they'd be concerned about losing. So I can't say that it would never be done, Anita. I think we'd like to provide something like that, but there are some complications, and I think we need to kind of see where this next year process goes in order to determine if that's going to be possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Anybody on Zoom? I cannot see if you have your hand up, so. Okay, don't hear anybody, so we will proceed to the next article, Article 16, Citizen Petition from Beverly Bryant.
Just wait for the slides here.
Right.
But I am Beverly Bryant from 175 Conant Street, and I'm petitioning the town of Concord for a 5-year moratorium on the installation of synthetic turf on town land.
Thank you.
Slides, maybe?
They're working on it. Here we go.
Yay. Okay, so this is the article. To see if the town will adopt a moratorium on the construction or installation of any synthetic turf defined as monofilament carpet with loose infill on any land of any size owned by the town for a 5-year time period starting on May the 1st, 2022 and ending on May the 1st, 2027, or to take any other action relative thereto. Slide 2. This moratorium is an extension of the moratorium first put in place at the 2016 town meeting. It will apply to all town land in Concord, including the Concord Public Schools. It does not apply to private land, nor the Concord Carlisle Regional High School, which includes the Douglas White Fields and the Stadium Field, because these fields are under joint jurisdiction with Carlisle. Slide 3. Synthetic turf is made from a plastic monofilament carpet with an infill made from discarded tires that are ground up into pellets called crumb rubber. New infills have been developed that include small plastic beads, treated wooden pellets called Brock fill, and other plant-based fills to replace the crumb rubber. Slide 4. Crumb rubber contains known carcinogens such as benzopyrene, which is banned in Europe, and endocrine disruptors like phthalates that block the function of the male hormone androgen. These developmental hormones are particularly dangerous in the low doses that occur in these fields. Children are more susceptible to these toxic chemicals than adults and absorb them while playing, either by mouth, through skin, or through off-gassing of the fields on hot days. Slide 5. In 2016, 3 government agencies together launched the Federal Research Action Plan to study crumb rubber and its effects on human health. This study is not yet complete, so does not answer questions about health risks. Since our moratorium was initiated, more chemicals of concern have been identified in synthetic turf. There have been no properly conducted case control studies on the risks of synthetic turf to children. Slide 6. Synthetic turf has a significant environmental impact. During heavy rains and snows, the chemicals and infill, whether crumb rubber, plastic beads, or other fills, are washed out of the fields and ultimately end up polluting our woodlands, waterways, and wells. They enter the food chain and put wildlife and humans at risk. This can be seen in both the Douglas White fields and the Stadium field, as you see here. Slide 7. The grass blades in artificial turf are made with the aid of polyfluoroalkyl substances, known as PFAS, as extrusion agents. Plastics used in synthetic turf have been found to contain PFAS chemicals, which have also been detected in Brock fill, the fill made from wooden pellets. PFAS do not degrade over time, but accumulate in the environment indefinitely. PFAS create serious health risks, for example, birth defects, cancer, and immune suppression. Slide 8. Tests to measure PFAS chemicals are only available for a few out of the thousands that exist. Massachusetts regulates measurable PFAS in drinking water to a limit of 20 nanograms per liter. In 2021, the Hugh Cargill well already had over half the legal limit. The addition of more synthetic turf threatens to further contaminate our water supply and potentially require expensive water treatments. Slide 9. The plastic grass blades break off at a rate of 0.3 millimeters per year, resulting in microplastics being constantly washed from the fields. The new plastic bead infills could also pollute Concord's waterways. Slide 10. The construction of synthetic turf fields works against the sustainability principles adopted by the town in 2011 by replacing an organic ecosystem with toxic chemicals that accumulate in the environment and pollute the soil and water, by making these fields net emitters of carbon rather than capturing carbon by photosynthesis, by destroying the biodiversity that grass fields support, and by adding to the toxic waste in landfills when they are disposed of. The climate emergency requires urgent action, and there is no doubt that these fields contribute to the problem. 11. Improvements in grass varieties have led to grasses that can stand up to hard use and drought conditions. They can be managed organically without pesticides or herbicides. A University of Missouri study showed that over a 16-year period, organically managed grass fields were far less expensive than conventional fields or synthetic turf. Some clubs are replacing their synthetic turf fields with natural grass because of increased leg and foot injuries. 12. Synthetic turf fields have to be replaced every 10 to 13 years and are not currently recyclable. They have to be disposed of in a landfill, usually out of state. Disposal costs are now estimated at $350,000 per field. This is an unnecessary cost to the town when there are readily available, cost-effective alternatives to synthetic turf in the form of organically managed grass. 13, thank you. In conclusion, we are asking the town to continue the current moratorium on synthetic turf for another 5 years, to protect our children from exposure to untested and toxic chemicals, to allow the ongoing research on the safety of synthetic turf to be completed, to protect our town from the toxic chemicals washing out of these fields. 14. To maintain our grass fields as a valuable ecosystem that captures carbon, and to protect the town from the increasing costs of disposal and replacement of these fields. I ask for your support on Article 16. Thank you. Shall I stay for questions?
Sure. Questions from the board? Matt?
Yes, your presentation made reference to a moratorium that was adopted in 2016, but I noted in the explanation box and also in the town warrant of 2019 that it's 2019.
We put one on in 2016 and again in 2019.
Okay.
So it's been on for 6 years now.
Okay, but I guess your presentation didn't make reference to the 2019.
I think I made reference to the 6 years, but do you think that needs clarity?
Well, it might be helpful if, for your town meeting presentation, just note that it was renewed and, that there was an original one in 2016, renewed in 2019, and now you're seeking a 5-year extension.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll do that.
And the presentation, I think at town meeting would probably need to be shorter, but this is typical that at the public hearing, you'd have a more extensive.
Do you have any idea of how long the presentation time?
I would defer to our moderator, who I believe is in attendance on Zoom.
Carmen, do you want to?
I mean, she would probably consult with you anyway.
Yeah, she will. I don't know if she's got a number right now.
Yeah, we'll take that up at the coordination meeting, Beverly.
Okay.
Other questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Tanya? Oh, Linda. Thank you.
Down over to your side. Thank you for that presentation. This is maybe too detailed of a question, but you reference in your presentation about waiting for the ongoing research, but at the same time, you're quoting research in the course of the presentation. So I guess one question I had is you indicate that the Brockville is also associated with PFAS. Is that one study? Do you know, is that multiple studies, and are they peer-reviewed or?
No, I think it's just been detected in Brockville. Yeah, so.
Okay.
The other study I referenced is the federal action plan, which they have got part 1 out, which indicates the chemicals and the toxicity of the chemicals, but what it doesn't do is identify the amount of exposure. So the risk is toxicity and exposure, and without that exposure piece, that federal action plan is still not giving us a sense of what risks the turf fields pose to children.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the board? All right, Tanya.
I just want to thank Ms. Bryant for her perseverance and steadfastness with this issue. I hope that this article does pass, and that I hope Concord Carlisle School District as well as private properties also adopt the measure and think about it. both because of the unknown health hazard and known health hazards, as well as all the climate change and nature respecting elements of it. So thank you very much for your perseverance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the audience? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to ask a question or make a comment?
If you're on Zoom and you're unmuted, that assumes
Okay, I've just heard there is a person who has a question, but they are muted.
nope, that was a mistake. It's not.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to the next article. Article 23, a citizen petition on ranked choice voting. We're looking for Kate Kavanaugh.
Hi, Kate Kavanaugh here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you. Firstly, I want to say I am here out of love, which might sound strange on this kind of meeting, but it is a real love for Concord and a real love for democracy. So putting them together, and it is a request for the Select Board to file home rule legislation to elect town offices by ranked choice voting or take any action related thereto. And I've lived in Concord for 27 years, raised my 3 kids here, and really, really love this community and so respect its place in our country's history for democracy. And I think it's an opportunity for us to lead again in this. If you could just click this and listen to it for a minute and a half, I think this will explain it to anybody who's not familiar with ranked choice voting. If you can't forward it, that's okay. I'm happy to field questions afterward if you'd like. You can move on to the next. Why RCV for Concord? We will see greater diversity of first-time candidates in particular. It will encourage people who are not in the system to come into the system, new voices. Prevents vote splitting with people who are conflicted between like-minded candidates, discourage negative campaigning. It'll ensure that elected officials represent the majority of the voters, not just the people who got the most votes. And it'll bring new interest and energy into our Concord town elections. Next, please. And no, this is by no means new. RCV has been used for years in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland. And in USA, there are 2 states that are currently doing all their elections with RCV. Maine passed it in 2016 and Alaska in 2020. And everybody knows the major election with Jared Golden and how he won dramatically against Poliquin in that election. And in the meantime, it's really sweeping across cities and towns in many, many states, Utah, California, Maryland, etc. And we all know about the New York mayoral election, and the screw up with that did not have to do with RCV, it had to do with the Board of Elections. Next slide, please. In Massachusetts, Cambridge has been using RCV since 1941. East Hampton just passed it recently and had an election that they did with ranked choice voting, went very smoothly. Amherst and Arlington are awaiting state approval. Under study, we've got Brookline, Northampton, and Somerville, and a number of other towns and cities in the Commonwealth are pursuing it as well. Next, please. And I believe Concord is ready for RCV. And the reason why is because in 2020, we had 34 Concordians who went out and gathered multiple signatures for it. And in the election, we had 2/3 of our Concord residents voting, and of those people, 61.4% said yes, they wanted ranked choice voting. So clearly this is something that the community supports, as they did before. And with some communities, they have to get new voting machinery in order to adjust to ranked choice voting. They have something called AccuVote, which is outdated, but we have DS200, so we do not have to have any investment in new machinery. Next, please. And what we'd be focusing on again is using ranked choice voting for town elected offices, which would be select board, school committee, housing authority, and moderator. It wouldn't do anything about the structure of those offices or affect state elections or a state ballot. We're strictly talking local. Next, please. And right now, this is how a ballot might look if we had some of our very famous Concordians on the ballot. Go to the next. And this is what it will look like with ranked choice voting. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you just list your preferences and the software processes it. Next one, please. The argument came up before that ranked choice voting was just too complex and too alien and too strange. Indeed, we use ranked choice voting all the time in our daily life, so we're very familiar with the premise. When your family needs to buy a car or consider any other kind of family decision, ranked choice voting, I'm sure, is what we use. If you're using fantasy sports league, creating a draft board, if you're just ordering pizza and you say, who wants anchovies, who wants pineapple, whatever, we all know how ranked choice voting works and are very familiar with it. And on top of that, the bipartisan piece, it is simply the majority of vote, the person with the most votes wins. The majority wins, whether they're Democrat or Republican or Green Party. It doesn't matter. That is how it works. It's not partisan. Next, please. Benefits will realize if we adopt again, prevent vote splitting, discourage negative campaigning, more diversity. We're really representing the majority of the voters and injecting more interest and energy into our town elections. Next, please. And of course, we'll be trailblazing again, which I would love to see. Next one, please. Here's some useful resources if people want to do a little bit more digging on RCV and how it might affect our community. And lastly, my wish is that we will move ahead and support warrant Article 23 to pass ranked choice voting for our local elections in Concord. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board?
Yes, I think that probably due to the technical issue with that presentation, we really did not hear in the presentation how ranked choice voting actually works. I mean, my understanding is that in the case where we have often multiple seats in an election, what would happen is that the votes for the top vote getting candidate, once they had achieved the threshold needed to be elected, the remaining votes for that candidate would be apportioned to the second choice of the remaining voters for that first candidate until those votes achieved the next candidate's election.
That's exactly right. And if you'd like me to share screen, I'd be happy to show that little demonstration as well, but you encapsulated it very well. The threshold of elections is going to vary depending on whether you're talking about electing a single candidate, as in our town moderator, or a board or a committee, multi-seat. And the threshold is going to differ according to how many positions you're filling. But the principle is the same in each case. You have to wait until you have one candidate that reaches the threshold plus one, whether the threshold is 50% when there's two people, or whether it's 33% when it's two people. And once you hit that threshold, that person is in, and then you take a look at the person who is the lowest and has no chance of hitting it, they go away, and then there's the people who voted for that person, their votes go to the second choice that they chose. And again, I can show the explanation if you'd like.
But it would make no difference if there were only 2 candidates for a position, would it?
No, they both get.
Same principle.
2 candidates for one position, it still would get the same result.
Yes.
And most of our positions, there is either 1 candidate or 2 candidates.
We rarely have the problem, the nice problem of having many candidates for a position, but indeed, in last year's select board election, we did. And
if people knew that there was this process in place, there might be more people who actually made themselves candidates.
that's also possible. The other thing is that it discourages practices like so-called bullet voting. Where in a multi-candidate race, you realize that if you really mostly care about one candidate getting elected, that it makes no sense to vote for a second candidate because you might actually make your candidate fail by giving the other majority. So in this case, by giving a second choice, if you have a second choice, you push things in the direction you'd like to go, if you will.
But you still don't have to exercise that second or third choice.
No, you don't have to, but then you're actually, yeah.
So I think what would be helpful at the town meeting, if you have time to add in the presentation some examples. Here's what happens when there's 1 available slot, like for moderator, and here's what happens when there's 2 slots for school committee, and just give some examples of how this threshold works.
Of how Ms. Alcott might get elected, for example.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Susan?
Thank you, Kate. That was very informative. But I had a question about what the threshold that is determined, 50% or 33%, what contributes to that? Just the first choice votes, or how does that, I'm not clear on how the second and third, say, choices are, what the combination is of those first, second, and third choice for a candidate.
Certainly, Susan. And actually, I have another slide that could explain it, but since I'm not sharing my slides, I will just try and tell you, because I'm not an authority at this piece of it by any means. The idea is that if you have 1 candidate, a threshold is the percentage of votes required for the candidate to be elected, right? So if you've got 2 candidates in 1 seat, they need to get at least 50% plus 1, right? To have a majority of the votes, correct?
But 50% of the people who pick them as number 1?
Correct.
With only 2 candidates in 1 seat.
Right, no, but I'm just trying to understand if there's 3 and 2 and 3 candidates for 2, or multiple candidates for less seats. If it's just the number of first choice votes that determines the threshold, what's the point of the second and third?
That's where I think examples would be really helpful. If you had, an example of this showing how somebody, they added up the first choice plus the second choice plus the third choice to get to the threshold, and you can show all of that in the example.
Sure. And so I guess I shouldn't do it in an animated example because that can't be shown. Is that correct?
Let's just say it's high risk.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But I have another question, which is on a totally different angle, which is that this article's effect is to petition the general court to make, to change to amend the town charter. And so I was curious about, if the general court ruled in favor, does our charter automatically change? Or are there other amendment requirements, for approval? In other words, is there a town-wide vote, approval at town meeting? You would think that, I mean, I guess we are voting for an amendment to the town charter along with petitioning the general court to approve a change to the town charter. I'm trying to understand, what is the actual effect of this?
Sure. Well, there are three different ways a town can go. The first one is to ask the legislature, can we do it? And if they say yes, then it's done. The second way is to say, we'd like your permission to put it for a vote to people. So if you say it's okay, we're going to send it back for a vote. Okay, that's two. The third one is, let's send it to a committee and study it for a year.
But I guess I'm trying to understand, if I'm at town meeting and I'm voting for this, am I voting for a sort of that multiple choice outcome? It's not clear to me that I am. It looks like what I'm voting for is for the town to petition the general court, the legislature, to authorize this, but it doesn't actually make the town charter change.
No. And given how strongly the community, pardon?
There would need to be subsequent action.
There would be subsequent action, but given how strongly the community has favored RCV, it seems to be unnecessary steps to say, let's have a committee to review, et cetera. It is, if we want to do it, let's ask the legislature to give us permission and do it.
If this is Carmen Reese, the town moderator, if I might interject, Matt, I don't believe there would need to be subsequent action.
Thank you.
This is well, what would need to happen is this. This is a citizen petition for the select board to file a petition with the legislature to enact home rule legislation. And the petition proposes the particular legislation that the legislature would be asked to enact, and that legislation would amend the town charter. Our town charter is not adopted under the Mass General laws. It is adopted pursuant to a special act of the legislature. And therefore, my understanding is that we are able to amend it by asking the legislature for special legislation to amend the charter. And that's what this citizen petition proposes to do. There have been some other situations where, take, for example, the citizen petition to, actually it wasn't a citizen petition, but the petition to give us home rule authority to enact the senior means tested property tax exclusion. That petition did have a provision that required the whole issue to go to a town-wide vote, as well as to come back to town meeting for approval. This petition isn't asking for either of those things. So it's not clear to me that anything, if the legislature, if town meeting votes for this petition to go to the legislature, the select board brings it and the legislature enacts the legislation, I believe that action by the legislature would in fact amend the charter.
I mean, we've had a number of charter amendments in the past, so I assume this is a settled issue.
Yes and no, because there is some question under the statute about whether certain types of amendments to the charter do require the convening of a charter commission. It appears that if a town has adopted its charter under a special act of the legislature and not under the statute, then that provision of the statute requiring a charter commission, because there is the statute, if you adopt your charter under the statute, it does say that you can change your charter, but you can only change certain types of things, and elections and terms of office are specifically noted as things you can't change without convening a charter commission to study the situation and bring it to a vote to voters. But it does not appear that that provision of the statute applies to Concord. I've had only a limited conversation with town council about this at this point, but there's not a whole lot that's simple about charter amendments, Matt, actually. So it was simple when we wanted to change the pronouns to gender neutral. And we did that one by asking, we did it the same way. We brought a petition to, it was an article sponsored by the Select Board. Town meeting approved it, and it was an article to bring a petition to the legislature for home rule authority to amend the charter. And it was brought to the legislature. The legislature did allow it. And now I'm actually trying to remember whether town meeting had to ratify that one more time. We might have had it come back one more time.
That's what I was wondering, is whether there'd be a ratification of any change to the charter. So, okay, well, certainly that's something that could be investigated later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Really appreciate your help there. Looks like Anita has a question.
Anita.
I do, thank you. And Kate, you and I have spoken about this, and I'm still troubled by why we're going through a charter amendment, because the method of voting, method of elections is not in our charter currently. We've got a fairly simple charter. Why not just do home rule legislation for ranked choice voting, a standalone home rule legislation that is less complicated, doesn't and won't touch the charter? You know, we don't have long things like this in our charter. Some towns do, but Concord, because we've got an older charter, home rule before there's an option to do them differently. We're one of the oldest charters in Massachusetts. I'm questioning why you're doing it as an amendment through the charter as opposed to a simpler way to do it. And I'm not an attorney. So Carmen is obviously seeing something that I'm missing here, but I'm wondering if you could clarify.
And you're asking that question of Carmen, correct?
Well, I guess I'm asking it of you, but well, you can.
You know, I am not that familiar with the inner workings of town government to be able to comment on that. But I do trust that we have people in this room who are more knowledgeable and who can research it. To me, the question is more, what is the intention of this community?
And I guess my response is it can be done just as well and just as easily in a home rule legislation, right, in that it's not currently addressed in our charter, the whole method of voting.
And that's how the article is written. Asking for a home rule legislation, not speaking about the charter amendment.
Well, it actually does say to amend the charter.
Yes. To the charter.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the extended? Okay, sorry, we could delete that part.
So if it's decided to do that, you would just delete that phrase. But
that would be great. Thank you. Appreciate your help.
Right. So I guess this is going to need some talk with town council to figure out how we should proceed. Because my understanding is that if you have a petition article and it's already on the warrant, you can't really change the language. But possibly at the town meeting, we could have the Beverly, Kate, you could move to amend it if that's what we decide to do. So
thank you. I'll take your advice. Thank you.
I'm also looking at the set of amendments in the history of the town charter, and I'm seeing not all of them, but most of them were accepted by town elections.
Okay, so this is a matter that town council needs to research. So I guess Carmen and Carrie will work with town council and do some more research on exactly how to do this.
Yeah, this is Carmen Reese. I actually agree with Anita. I don't see any need to amend the charter here. This is the way the petitioner submitted the petition. You certainly could seek to amend the charter, but I'm not sure it's necessary to amend the charter. And with respect to how the petitioner moves the article at town meeting, she can certainly move the article in a non-identical way at town meeting, so long as how she moves it is within the scope of the original article. And she would need to have the consent of the rest of her signatories on her petition if she made a change, or it could be an amendment. And again, the amendment would have to be within the scope of the article, and that's something we could discuss as we move further.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
If it's hard to understand what difference it would make if we adopted this, the question would be, is it worth the trouble?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so stay tuned for more information. Okay. Kari, yes.
Thank you. Kari Maitari, Town Clerk. I have two questions. The first is the term overvote is used in the warrant article, but it's not referenced anywhere in the actual article. So the definition is there, but it's not referenced. And my second question is, how will the ballot counting parameters be decided? Will that be something that's detailed in the language of this article or not? For instance, an overvote. If someone chooses more than one candidate for their first choice, how will that be decided? Ranking one candidate several times so that the same candidate is ranked for, let's say there are 4 candidates and they're ranked for all 4 choices. How will that be counted? Also, if a ballot skips a ranking or 2, is that okay to have one ranking skipped so that, for instance, someone chooses for their first choice, their third and their fourth choice, but does not have a second choice? How is that handled? Those are all questions that need to be answered in order for the results to be able to be produced.
Okay, thank you for that. Kate, do you want to try to answer those questions?
Not at this time, especially because I have a resource who doesn't happen to live in Concord, so he's not on this meeting, but he is an authority in all those things. So he can help us in working through exactly whatever fine points you have.
Okay, but those questions may come up at town meeting. And again, I think if you prepare some examples where actually the second choice is missing and things like that, you can show them on the screen. You know, this ballot would be thrown out, this ballot would be counted this way, etc.
Correct. Thank you. Great feedback. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes.
Got somebody else.
Okay. Dee, I think you were first. Okay. Or, go ahead.
Thanks. Dee Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. I just have a suggestion that rather than packing the whole presentation with all this detail, that it might be good to have a handout that describes what we've been talking about.
Excellent. Yes, that's a really good idea. I think if you went through every type of example, the presentation would be too long. So yes, they should be on a handout. Excellent idea. There was somebody on Zoom who had their hand up. Claire Gordon.
Unmute. Yes, my question is similar to the town clerk's question. I'm wondering which of the ballots that are in excess are counted, for example, for a second choice. For example, if you counted a certain precinct entirely first, that might skew things because people in another precinct may have voted a different way. Or if you voted, I mean, I don't know how the machines do this, but they have to be programmed to decide which are the excess votes that get counted for the next round.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, all of that should be on the handout to explain how the voting process really will be counted.
Yes.
Are there other questions?
What you really need is a detailed set of rules.
Yes.
And I don't know if there is a firmly accepted concept that can be adopted so that we could actually have any examples of how the rules would work in different cases.
Right. I believe there must be, because they're using...
Yes, there are those sets of rules. And they differ depending on the towns and the cities because they've got different situations, but there are certainly those rules. I'd be happy to share them.
But what we are voting on, though, is this article and the rules as stated in this article. That's what would become our procedure.
And the fact that different towns have different rules just serves to make the whole thing more confusing and less predictable.
I'm sorry, when I said that, I meant it because they don't have the same number of elected offices. You know, that there are some towns that elect treasurers and other kinds of positions that we don't.
Yeah, I would have to say that ranked choice voting is a well-established procedure. In other words, I mean, like there are voting machines that have, software encoded to actually automate those rules. It's to that level of detail and standard.
Right, and they're using them in Maine and Alaska, but what we need to do is spell that all out.
Well, it needs to be in the article.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It is, and that article was adapted from Arlington and Amherst. So that was using their information.
Okay. Other questions on Article 23? Was that a person who wants, is there somebody else? It's hard to, we don't have anything on Zoom that's showing us. Nobody. Thank you, Kate. Okay, I'm making the presentation on Article 36. Go up here. Thank you. Slides are here. All right. Article 36 should be pretty simple. Basically, it is to adopt the provisions of Chapter 53, Section 18B. And what this says is that we would put more explanation on when we have a ballot vote. So if we go to the next slide, when we have a ballot vote, for example, we just voted on the middle school, the legal language is very confusing to some people, and it's very, very basic. You're only allowed to say, should we vote for this school located at such and such address, yes or no? And that's all you're allowed to say. Now, if we adopt this Article 36, we'll be able to put on the ballot a pro statement and a con statement. And not only will it be on the ballot, but voters will receive this summary explanation in the mail. This is a state law that was passed in 2011, and all we have to do is adopt it. It doesn't have to come back to the town again. We don't need special legislation or anything else. All we have to do is vote yes on Article 36. And if it passes, any future debt exemption to Prop 2.5, for example, would be able to contain all the summary information, including costs of the project, benefits of the project, tax information, a very brief argument about why you vote for it, and a brief argument why you would vote against it. Next slide. So what would be included would be the full text of the question, a fair and concise summary, the pro argument, the con argument, and they're 150 words or less each. One sentence explaining the impact of a yes vote, one sentence explaining the impact of a no vote, and all this information will be on the ballot and mailed to every household that has registered voters. And the next slide just shows how it works. First, the select board votes that the question appears on the ballot. Well, we already do that. Then we notify the town clerk. And now the new stuff would be that the proponents and opponents would be asked to submit their written arguments of 150 words or less. And then those arguments will be sent to the select board and then mailed at least 7 days before the election to all the households with registered voters. And really, that's it. It's very simple. Many towns have adopted this. It's been around since 2011. We urge your vote on Article 36. So are there any questions?
Yes. So realizing that there's more than one way to be a proponent or an opponent, if there are multiple parties that are submitting statements, how do we determine which statement ends up being mailed out to voters?
Right. So this law says that town council decides which of the statements to use.
Town council does.
Town council decides and approaches the proponent of the article. So for example, for the middle school, it would probably be the middle school building committee would write the pro statement.
But let's say an opposing statement.
Right. I don't know how they would choose, but they would find someone who opposes it and ask if they wanted to submit the 150 words.
But, okay, but let's just assume we get more than one opponent submitting their 150 words. Who decides? It's the town council decides whose 150 words or some blend of them?
They might use a blend, but the law does specify that it's town council that would decide this. And I think the reason, I thought about that, it seemed kind of strange to me, but I guess it's because town council maybe is considered a neutral party, that they don't live in town and they're not a proponent or an opponent. They're a neutral body in this.
But I mean, we're usually voting on some town initiative that is,
right.
I mean, isn't the town council representing the town?
Well, but
I mean, a lot of times opponents are opposing a town initiative.
Could be, but that's what the law specifies. If you adopt this, that's how it will work.
Okay. I just didn't realize that I thought that we were just voting for getting the numbers onto the ballot.
Right.
So that when somebody saw, okay, we're approving debt exclusion for the school, and by the way, it costs this much. I didn't realize we were creating a whole pro and con, forum on the ballot.
Right, I didn't either, but if you want to know, and by the way, it costs this much, you cannot put that on the ballot or mail it to anyone or do anything right now unless you pass this law. That's the problem.
But if you do any of it, you have to do all of it?
That's right. Prop 2.5 says you're only allowed to use this minimum bare bones legal language that we're stuck with.
And I assume too that there's a cost involved because you have to mail all this out, this additional information out, like an information booklet in effect.
Well, yeah, unless we can combine it with another mailing that's going out anyway, like a FinCom book or something. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm liking. I mean, I usually like more information, but I'm.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Tanya's next, and then Dee.
Yeah, I was going to ask something along Matt's questions. I just came back to the microphone to say that there have been cases, even recently, where town council has defended the select board's position on some matters at town meetings. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't know how it works in cities or other communities or in the state level, but, and it might also just get confusing when different people, provide different ideas and how to combine them or blend them. Maybe the select board has to vote, I don't know, but even that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Dee?
Dee Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. I just, if I understood correctly, if this passes, it has to be both on the ballot as well as sent to homes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'm kind of concerned about the impact in terms of the length of time in the voting lines. If you have people who have not read what they received at home and they come and they're reading this, has any research been done on that, since you said it's been in existence since, what, 2011 or 2012?
I don't know, but I see Kari might be able to answer that.
Kari Maitari, Town Clerk. I just want to say that 7 days is the absolute minimum set by the law. The town can certainly send out the information much earlier, especially given that absentee ballots are available often 21 days before an election. I also wanted to clarify that what the law says is that that council will, that for the purpose of this section, principal proponents and opponents of a question shall be those persons determined by the council to be best able to present the arguments for and against the question.
So they're arbiters of who gets to speak, but not what is said.
Right, correct.
This is very similar to what you get on the referendum questions from the Secretary of State. It's almost exactly the same process, is it not? And you get that booklet every year before the election with the referendum questions, with the pro and con statements.
Right. Kari?
Add that on the ballot, there would just be one question stating what a yes vote would do, and one sentence saying what a no vote would do. There's no more information than that on the
ballot itself.
Right.
Right, so that actually answers your question, Dee, about taking a long time in the voting booth. There's only one summary sentence on the ballot.
Okay, then I have one other question, and maybe Kari can answer this one as well. I'm wondering if this additional information is on the ballot, is there a modification for people who are visually impaired? And do we currently have that for our voting ballots?
We do.
We do.
We have an ADA accessible printer, ballot printer, that will read the information to a person. It's available at every polling place.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Carlin?
Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I'm in favor of this very much because as a poll worker at the last election, I had overheard several voters ask, wanting to find out not so much, for example, the dollar amount of the middle school, but what excluded from debt meant. And I, as one of the poll workers, was not able to explain that, and they didn't have any explanation of what that particular phrase meant. So this would solve that problem.
Thank you. That's a really good way to put it. The poll workers may not know every last detail of what's on there and what all the technicalities mean, but the law insists that we use its exact language. And some people are confused by it. So we're trying to make it more transparent with this article.
Well, the poll workers can't explain anything to voters. That would be totally improper.
Right. Even if they knew, right. Tanya?
Yeah, it's not the same kind of convenience as a written statement, but perhaps, could we perhaps consider to put in the ballot links to the public hearings about the question?
Nope. You cannot do anything. It's a very strict rule. Are there some questions on the Zoom audience? Anita?
Yes, we actually considered this it was never on the warrant before, but it was considered a number of years ago. And one deterrent, and I should add, I support this article, but you should be aware that the requirement of the law, if we accept this law, is that we have to do it for every ballot question. And there is a cost that goes with that for the mailing of postcards or whatever mailing you were going to do. So even something very simple would still have to do it because the language says shall send this paperwork. And that was why it wasn't actively pursued beyond a number of years ago when we were having these things. But because ballot questions are not all Prop 2.5. So just be aware, if we accept it, then we'll have to do it for every ballot question.
Thank you for that clarification. And my understanding was that it came before the Concord voters, I think 3 times, before the year 2011 when this local option law passed. So what the Concord voters looked in 2006 was slightly different from this, but thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions on Zoom?
I have a question, Terry.
Is that Diane?
Hi, Terry. Thank you. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. Although I observe for the League of Women Voters, I'm speaking for myself. And also, I think in the sense of what the League would wish, which is that the more information we can give voters, the better. It's actually more expensive not to be informed than to be informed. And if it costs some money to send this out to all voters, we stand the chance of having people understand better and be motivated to actually come and vote because they really do understand its importance. So I could not urge more vigorously that this happen. And the League often sends out such explanations to all citizens at our cost because we believe this is so important. So thank you for forwarding this.
Thank you. Other questions from Zoom people? All right, seeing none, we will go to Article 37, and the proponent is, I believe, Joseph Stein.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Is my audio okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So my name is Joseph Stein. I live at 21 Thoreau Street, and I'm proposing Article 37, which is to authorize the Select Board to petition to impose a checkout bag charge. And I just want to acknowledge that I had help from the Surfrider Foundation with both this presentation as well as the warrant article language. Next slide, please. So this petition really just asks for the first steps to adding a charge for all checkout bags in Concord stores. The state law currently does not allow towns, it allows cities, I believe, but not towns in Massachusetts to directly adopt their own bag charges. So this article would effectively authorize the Select Board to petition the state legislature for a special law that would establish or that would requiring that retail establishments in Concord charge a minimum of 10 cents for each checkout bag distributed, and the money collected would be retained by the retailer. Next slide, please. So there are really 4 purposes. One is to incentivize consumers to really reuse checkout bags, which are the most environmentally sustainable and economical option. The second is to give consumers the choice to not pay for unwanted or unneeded bags. 3, it's to allow collected money to be retained by the retailer to help defray his or her costs. And 4, to reduce waste and the disposal and recycling costs that are borne by the town and its residents ultimately. Next slide, please. I think it's important to recognize that this is not a tax. The money collected would remain with the retailer. There would be transparency via an explicit bag charge on all receipts. And as mentioned, this special law must be passed by the Massachusetts Legislature and signed by the governor to go into effect. And it's worth noting that this is not something new. Our neighbors, Lincoln and Sudbury, had both passed warrant articles last year at their town meetings. And really, this is the identical language that was put forth for those town meetings. Next article, please. Next slide, please. Not going to spend too much time here, but obviously, we have a problem with waste. The average American produces about 5 tons of trash each day. Much of the plastic waste ends up in our aquatic ecosystems. So this article is really just a small step in helping reduce trash in Concord and reduce some of the disposal and recycling costs associated with that. Next slide, please. Whoops, looks like something didn't quite make it into the slide. So the first thing is it's good for the environment. So studies show that a small required charge is really the best tool for encouraging bag reuse and reducing unnecessary new bags. And so there was a study done in Los Angeles County recently where they enacted a 10-cent bag charge with an existing plastic bag ban. And they showed that effectively the amount of bag reuse, or the use of reusable bags basically went from 5% to about 45%. Those statistics are for some reason not showing up in the slide. With similar statistics for actually no bag being used at all. So a small nominal bag charge is extremely effective in changing human behavior. Next slide, please. Ooh, yeah, we can probably keep going. Okay, yep, thank you. So I'll have to fix that. Studies also show that when consumers receive free checkout bags, they generally treat them as disposable, regardless of if it's paper or plastic. And as I mentioned, reusing bags is the best option as environmental costs are spread out over repeated uses. So just a quick note, the number of uses needed to beat single-use plastic bags on greenhouse gas emissions. So if we click on the, yep, so paper requires 3 uses, polypropylene about 11, and cotton 131. So obviously reusable bags require more uses, but those bags last quite a long time. I'm still using my cotton bag 10 years ago that I bought. Next slide, please. So Concord currently has a plastic bag reduction bylaw that was put into place 7 years ago now. But I think it's worth mentioning that bag-only policies can actually have unintended consequences. So one is that they shift people to using and disposing paper bags. They're better on biodegradability, of course, but they're also potentially much worse on net greenhouse gas emissions, water use, chemical emissions, deforestation. And they also, these bag-only policies risk being environmentally counterproductive. And so we've seen examples in town where retailers exempt themselves by simply increasing the bag thickness to make them quote unquote reusable. Which, is not really the bylaw intent. And so the proposal here is to add a checkout bag charge, which when coupled with our existing ban on single-use plastic bags is really the most effective policy. Next slide, please. So it's good for the environment. It's also good for Concord residents. So we're already paying for bags. A transparent, easily avoidable charge would allow shoppers to choose to save money by reusing bags. And so a consumer could pay 10 cents for each bag that they use, or they could bring in their own bag, assuming $1 a polypropylene bag, it would be about less than 2 cents per use on average. And then, as mentioned, reduced demand for checkout bags reduces waste and disposal and recycling costs borne by the town. Next slide, please. So it's good for the environment. It's good for Concord Concord residents. It's also good for the retailers. You know, the bags aren't free. It costs them money. And so a checkout bag charge would help defray these costs. It'll also level the playing field and help stores switch to the most sustainable options. And I think it's worth noting that the Massachusetts Food Association actually testified in support of a statewide bag charge 2 years ago. Next slide, please. This works. It's been enacted in Boston, as well as Haverhill, Newton, Cambridge, and Framingham. To my knowledge, Sudbury and Lincoln are the only two towns that have enacted this. It's statewide in California and Maine and Vermont, as well as numerous European countries for quite some time, actually. Next and last slide, please. So it's a win-win-win. It's really a win for the environment, a win for Concord residents, and a win for Concord businesses. And I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? Matt?
So I assume that the bag, because the revenue stays with the retailer, it's a taxable item. In other words, it increases, you know, it's not a tax exempt item like, let's say, if you go to the grocery store, the food itself would be.
I didn't quite understand the question. So
you're purchasing a bag.
Yeah.
Is the bag a taxable item?
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's a good question. I'm actually not sure.
Okay, the second question I have is that have the Sudbury and Lincoln petitions been approved by the general court, or are they pending?
Yeah. So my understanding is that I would have to look into that. When I spoke with the folks who helped them at Surfrider, they said that the legislation, this was last year, was moving quite quickly through, so it's fairly non-controversial. That's what they told me. So I'd be happy to follow up. I think it's enacted in Sudbury. I'm not 100% sure.
We hear from our legislators all the time that our legislation, special legislation, is moving very quickly. It's all relative. Are you aware if there is, because this is the other tactic that frequently happens, there is some move to create a opt-in?
Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, if I understand the question, maybe I don't, but I think it's interesting to note that there were studies that show that actually getting a refund, is that what you're getting at, Matt?
No, I'm sorry. And this is kind of perhaps an obscure question for those of us that don't do the special legislation all the time. But for example, for our fossil fuel special legislation that we're trying to pursue, along with several other towns in Massachusetts, one of the things that's holding that up is that meanwhile, there's a parallel track whereby they're trying to create a statewide initiative whereby towns could then just vote get this, as opposed to something where each and every town has their own independent bylaw. Because of course, what happens is that, let's say, retailers that operate on a state level would complain that, well, the regulation for Concord is different from the one for Sudbury, which is different from the one for Lincoln.
It's really confusing for retailers. It's a patchwork of regulation.
There you go. That's the phrase they always use.
So, yeah, I guess the way I would respond to that is it's really what we want to do. I mean, we could wait until the state comes up with a statewide regulation, or we could push forth as our neighbors have done. But I agree with you. It can be very confusing for the retailers.
I think that some retailers give a discount to customers who bring their own bag. And I don't think that we would need any legislation for them to do that, would we?
I mean, it's a current practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting tactic. I can share a study with you if you're interested, but there has been studies that show that that's actually not effective in changing human behavior. So humans respond more to a nominal charge than they would for the same amount getting a rebate. So they're like, yeah.
Okay, other questions from the board? Okay, D. Ortner.
Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. Under section C or 3 on this, it says that the Board of Health will have responsibility for enforcing the law and regulations promulgated. And I'm wondering if the applicant has any information on studies that show the economic impact to the Board of Health or comparable ones to the Board of Health in enforcing this law.
Thank you for the question. I don't. And this language, in full transparency, was taken directly from Sudbury's warrant article. So this may or may not even apply to Concord, to be honest with you. And I unfortunately don't have the answer to that question. I could dig, but I don't have it tonight.
So if we didn't want to have the Board of Health, I'm just giving you as an example, if we didn't want to have the Board of Health be the rules and regulations organization, can that be done by an amendment, or how would we proceed with that? Or can we just get the information on what the costs are going to be?
We can get the costs, and it's up to the moderator and town council to decide if that amendment would be allowed, be within the four corners, and whether the petitioner would agree to it. So there would have to be more discussion if you want to make an amendment.
Well, I don't care to make an amendment, but I'm just wondering if it's the Board of Health, is it the DPW who should have responsibility for this? I'm throwing it out there.
I mean, do we have someone called the health agent as a member of our Concord Board of Health?
I have no idea.
Is that a role?
I don't know.
Carrie?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm assuming that means the health director.
Yeah,
but the question would be, that's an interesting question, is how would the Board of Health or any other town official enforce this? Would there be a fine? Would it be a violation of a town bylaw? Would it be a violation of the health code? What would be the enforcement mechanism or the penalty?
It says a non-criminal disposition. Yeah, pursuant to Mass General Laws 4021D.
Okay.
So there's something there. It's just I don't know who the health agent is.
Well, it probably is the health director, and We are currently interviewing now for a health director, so.
But I'm just curious, what other laws does the Board of Health, I mean, the Board of Health currently enforces sanitation and, you know.
They did the tobacco or cigarette purchases.
There you go.
They were responsible for, but that's a direct alignment. I was
With
thinking
health,
if
whereas
paper,
this is paper bags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the Board of Health will probably be taking a position on this article. Do they want to enforce it? They like it, they don't like it? You know, we're going to need to hear from them.
Good.
Okay.
Terry?
Linda?
So I'm wondering if the petitioner has reached out to any of the businesses in town to get their reaction to this?
That's a great question. I have not. I have not.
It would be good to do that before town meeting, definitely.
Thank you.
Other questions from the audience?
Carrie, we have 3 members in Zoom who have questions. Pamela Dritt is the first.
All right, Pamela Dritt.
Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I just wanted to say I really approve of this. One of the advantages of it being a rule instead of a voluntary thing is then it's a level playing field. And it allows everyone to do the same thing with everybody getting the benefit. No retailer gets dinged for charging for this. And no retailer has to spend money to give rebates if you bring a bag, your own bag, like some already do. So I think this is a wonderful way of going about it. Typical good nudge economics.
Thank you.
Economics. I'm in favor. I hope it goes.
Thank you.
Next, we have Janet Rothrock.
Janet Rothrock.
Oh, hi, Janet Rothrock, 618 in Ersnack Hill Road. I believe that the Board of Health already enforces the thin bag bylaw, which was enacted some few years ago. So I would assume that this would not be a terrific burden on them. And my understanding is that after the initial break-in phase, they pretty much rely on citizens to report if they see something amiss. And so it hasn't been a huge burden on them. The other thing is, in regard to the comment that towns differ in their application of this sort of bylaw, and it does create a patchwork, and that's unfortunate, but the end result is eventually the state will most likely have a uniform rule for all towns. So we just have to put up with one town having a slightly different application of the concept than another town. And eventually the state gets around to sorting out the problem in a uniform manner because everybody realizes it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next is Stefan Bader.
Stefan Bader.
Yes, I think this is a good idea. I think the Board of Health already, as Janet just mentioned, deals with plastic bags. They also deal with the issue of polystyrene packaging, which is most often found at supermarkets, but also at takeaway or doggy bags from restaurants. So it's already in an environment that the Board of Health or their agent, and as has been mentioned, their agent could be a contracted person who does the blind tobacco purchase attempts, or a contracted person who does other work under the purview of the Board of Health, but hired by the Board of Health to do that kind of work. So it makes sense to me. I don't know what their position on it is, but it makes sense to me that that's as logical an application, as logical a location for the responsibility as any other within the town. I don't think the Public Works Department, which has a recycling and waste management staff of one person, is, even though the bags may end up in the trash stream, I don't think that's the most efficient way to go about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments on Zoom?
There's no one else in the Zoom audience with a
Right.
raised hand.
Okay, we will move on to our last article, Article 38. Citizen petitioner is Dean Banfield.
Good evening. Can you put the slides in full view mode? Oops, we lost them. There we go. All right, thank you. I'm Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace. I have a quick disclaimer. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking on this article as an individual citizen, not representing the Finance Committee, any other group, or any other individual. End of disclaimer. Okay, that's a legal thing, I gotta say that. You can read the text of the article here in the warrant, but I'd just like to focus on two main goals. The main objective is to get the light plant back into the business of creating solar generation facilities on town properties. The secondary intention is that we step back and do this in a thoughtful and transparent manner, engaging with the questions and challenges that are inherent in the process and establishing a plan that will allow us to reach or exceed our target. Next slide. So what is our target? Our target is, the Climate Action Plan says we should be at 20 megawatts of solar generation on town property by 2030. As you can see here, we're about a third of the way there, and we need to create about 12 and a half more megawatts between now and 2030. Next slide. As you can see from this timeline, we began 12 years ago with a more aggressive target of 25 megawatts, and we made excellent progress until January of 2017, when the W.R. Gray solar array went live. Then at town meeting that year, we passed Article 51 to align our greenhouse gas reduction targets with those of the state. But at the end of 2017, the light plant had deprioritized municipal solar development, and none has been created since. The Climate Action Plan trimmed the original target to 20 megawatts, but even at this reduced goal, we still need to create between 1.5 and 2 megawatts per year to achieve our objective. Next slide. Right now, about 90% of the electricity that we use is coming from non-emitting sources, and the Light Board expects to move that number to 100% by 2025. So the question this article asks you to weigh in on is this: is local solar on our municipal properties still an important priority? Well, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was. Local renewable power generation on our municipal buildings and schools is a direct indication of our values as a community and shows that we're willing to do what we can to reduce our imposition on others for the energy we use. Looking at the problem with a wider lens, the state has recognized that its earlier greenhouse gas reduction framework that Concord signed on to in 2017 was not aggressive enough. And the state has created fresh roadmaps through both regulatory and legislative actions. Broadly speaking, these actions target investor-owned utilities, and municipal light plants are generally exempted from being required to fall into line with the latest standards. But I believe Concord should be doing whatever we can. Next slide. Adding more solar generation will not come without effort. The highest priorities of a municipal light plant are to provide reliable electric service at a reasonable price. Ratepayers should be able to anticipate stable electric rates with only modest increases over time. Creating more local solar will need to be done in the context of rate stability, and any possible upward pressure on rates will need to be balanced against alternatives. We also need to be thoughtful about the current infrastructure of CMLP. The distribution system in town will need to manage the extreme variability of solar power generation. So I don't want to minimize the need to work through the technical barriers that may exist. But when I review the work that has been done elsewhere I am encouraged that these kinds of challenges can be overcome with careful technical planning and appropriate financial analysis. This is why the article specifies a planning period for the remainder of 2022 with a review by the Select Board and the Finance Committee. Next slide, please. Touching briefly on the benefits of doing this, I've already mentioned the value of doing what we can to create the energy that we consume. But there's an adjacent value at work here. The distributed nature of renewable power generation will help to reduce the historical disparities between the places where power is produced and where it is consumed. As we electrify vehicles and buildings, our thirst for more electricity will keep growing, and that demand will strain the wider New England electric grid. Local solar helps us to alleviate some of that stress, and that translates into avoided costs. And once the financials are worked out, solar should slot in as a stable component of our electricity portfolio, not subject to any kind of price shocks for the 30 years each array is expected to remain in service. Next slide. We've all seen the consequences of our warming planet through increasing frequency and destructiveness of extreme weather events. Ecosystem changes previously understood to take hundreds or thousands of years are being reduced to the length of a human lifetime. The Earth is not waiting until 2025 for Concord to open a new middle school, so we simply need to act with more urgency. By getting back in the game, the light plant can help the state with its 3% annual renewables target and can hopefully chip away at the highest cost component of its power portfolio. Next slide. To give a sense of scale, I'll just close with a short list. The system currently designed to maximize the future CMS campus could create about 1.1 megawatt, or less than the minimum we need to create each year until 2030. We will need to look at all of our schools, buildings, and parking lots, and also find another utility scale site similar to our W.R. Grace installation. So let's all commit to getting started today. Next slide. Thank you very much, and I look for your support on Article 38.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Susan.
Thanks, Dean. That was very informative. And my question is a little tangential to what you presented, but I wondered what the state of storage batteries is for electric power. I know that it's not
a tangential question, Susan. It's synergistic with this proposal. Storage batteries help in shifting the energy that we might generate through solar. They can store it if we're not using it at that time and shift it into the evening and then discharge it. So it helps to reduce peak demand in the evening hours as the sun's going down, but we're coming home, we're turning on our lights, we're making sure the air conditioner is as high as we need it to be, but the sun has started to go down. So batteries are synergistic with this proposal.
It was more about the capacity of batteries. A couple of years ago, they were saying that you didn't really have batteries big enough to do that.
Batteries are a very viable solution at this point. The town of Sterling, Massachusetts runs a municipal light plant. In 2014, the town of Sterling installed a very large battery the size of a trailer, and they're using that to literally generate income at this point. The payback period for that was only 2 years because they got huge grants to do it. But if the grants were not there, the payback period for it was 6.3 years. So batteries are viable, and they are something that the light plant actually has on their strategic plan right now to implement. They're hoping to get an RFP out before June of this year, but frankly, I don't see how they're going to send out an RFP if they don't have a bond authorization on this year's warrant. So how are they going to pay for the battery? But that's a different question.
Details. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions from the board? Okay, I see Tanya coming to the microphone.
Thank you. Thanks, Dean. The great article. My concern is about do you anticipate any tree clearings to happen in order
to
accommodate
that's
solar?
Obviously an issue. I do think that we would start with what I'll call the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of schools, There are parking lots, CCHS parking lot. If you go to Lincoln Sudbury, if you go to Wayland High School, all of those parking lots have canopies on them. There's no reason that we can't start there, but we will need to study where we can go. 2229 Main Street area is ripe for a potential, maybe a possible zoning overlay where any buildings that get built must include solar. Parking lots have to have solar. We could put a nice, light industrial or office complex over there, but we could say your parking lots have to have solar or something like that. There's all kinds of solutions that we can look at. Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
Mary Hartman, 16 Concord Green, member of the FinCom, speaking for myself. Thanks, Dean. You took a lot of information and hit the high points. I have a question about process. What you're asking for here is remind me again of exactly what you're asking for here and how this integrates with the work of the CMLP and the Light Board.
Okay, I'll do the best I can with that question. The Light Board is working with a strategic plan that they set out in late 2017, and the date stamp on the plan is 2018 to 2025, and they've been working through that for that many years. In that plan, solar generation on town-owned properties is not a priority. And yet it's in our climate action plan that we need to build this stuff out, and so there's a disconnect there. To keep moving forward, we need to step back and create a process to build out 12.5 megawatts. We need time to do that. I think the Light Board is open to revising their strategic plan. I've spoken to the chair. She's opening their strategic plan up at their next meeting for discussion. So hopefully there's some possibility of revision so they can add this in. But the fact is, it's going to take, we could go off tomorrow. We have had 3 proposals for how to put solar arrays on the Beatty since 2010. The latest was in 2020. And those proposals could be opened up, and we could probably have the Beatty, lit up with solar arrays by the end of this year if we went off sort of like willy-nilly and decided let's just go do that. But I think we should step back and create an architecture that's expansive, that maybe includes batteries, as Susan was suggesting, that allows us to, sequentially do installations and without impacting the grid or, technically causing problems. So I think we need time to get ourselves ready to go and then go. I would love to see us have between 1 and 2 megawatts by the end of 2023 installed, and we will still be 2 years away from the CMS building ever being ready to go. So I think we can go faster than that, but I don't think we can just start right in and just start doing projects. I don't think that's the right way to do it. So I'm trying to give us some time and space to be planful about it and create a real plan to get it done. So,
Carlin.
Thank you. Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. Dean, you've been giving this presentation to several town committees, as I understand.
Yes.
Have you received any endorsements at this point? And who are you looking
CSEC
for?
voted after I gave my presentation there. They voted to support affirmative action on this article. I don't know what the CAB will do. I've given it to the CAB. I'm due to give it to the League on their first Friday, next Friday. So I'm making the rounds.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And related to that, will CMLP be taking a position, I assume? Okay, but you haven't yet. Okay.
Terry, in the Zoom audience, Janet Rothrock has her hand up.
Okay, Janet Rothrock.
This may be
I apologize. I thought my hand was down. I'm sorry. I will lower it.
Okay, thank you.
Pamela Dritt.
Pamela Dritt.
13 Concord Green. Thank you very much. I'm enthusiastically in favor of this because We don't have time to do anything other than support the maximum amount of solar investment in infrastructure that we can possibly make. There's no other way to save the world from climate change. It's not enough by itself, but it's essential. And one of the things you mentioned about industrial batteries, I think is very important. The technology is moving really fast. Green industrial storage can include, for instance, Concord's electric school bus fleet batteries, which can also be plugged into the grid to help balance the supply in times of extra need, and also soak up any more solar that we have on a hot summer day than the grid can use. That's an industrial backup battery too, as well as helping the kids not get sick from diesel fumes. We can create, if we use also residential solar installations with battery backups, which is how they are pretty much all come now, we can create our own local peaker plant. And using industrial battery storage instead of the standard backup diesel generator, not only is carbon free, it's cheaper and can be used to balance the grid when there isn't a power outage, saving lots of money for the whole town in the long run. I think we ought to think of every homeowner investment in residential solar is an investment in green energy that CMLP doesn't need to make. So we have to make sure that our financial incentives don't disincentivize home solar, but encourage it. And the same with the town solar opportunities that you've mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions on Zoom? No. All right. Any other public comment on this article or any other article?
So move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Boy, you didn't even give him 5 seconds. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.